My family told everyone I was a loser. They made sure every neighbor, every family friend, even distant relatives knew that I was the one who never figured things out. Last month, I worked the door at my brother's charity gala. I stood there, holding a clipboard, trying to disappear, until the billionaire donor walked up and stared at me. He pointed and said, "Wait, you're the founder?" And suddenly, cameras started flashing, and I realized my life was about to change in front of everyone who had counted me out. Growing up, I always felt like I was just an extra in my family's perfect movie. My brother Carter was the star. He was the golden child who always knew how to charm a room, who brought home trophies and awards, who made my parents glow with pride at every dinner party. Our mom, Helen, lived for those moments, for the applause and polite smiles from her social circle. My dad, Frank, wasn't as loud about it, but he would look at Carter like he was some rare masterpiece, nodding and saying, "That's my boy," as if the rest of us barely existed. Meanwhile, I was Isla, the quiet one who loved to draw, who got excited about after-school volunteering and community projects. My parents would sigh and tell their friends I was still finding myself, the polite phrase they used instead of saying they thought I was a failure. At dinner, Carter would brag about closing big deals and meeting celebrities. Mom would beam and pour him more wine, leaning across the table to kiss his cheek. When I tried to talk about the community coding workshops I was running or the single mothers I helped with their resumes, the room would go silent. My dad would clear his throat and change the subject to Carter's next big event. At family gatherings, I became the joke. My uncle once laughed, "Isla's the family charity case, right?" And everyone joined in. I learned to laugh along, to hide the sting by taking deep breaths and focusing on my plate. I kept my head down, working long nights on my small nonprofit project in my apartment, dreaming of making real change. My nonprofit helped single moms learn basic tech skills, build small online businesses, and support each other. I saw their confidence bloom every week, but at home, my family called it my little hobby, just another sign of how lost I was. When Carter told me about his charity gala, I thought maybe this was a chance to finally be part of the family, to be seen as more than the background character. But instead of inviting me as a guest, he asked if I could help at the door, like a polite way of telling me to stay out of sight. "You're good at greeting people," he said, smirking. "Just make sure no one sneaks in without a ticket." Mom told me not to embarrass them. Dad just nodded and said, "Let Carter handle the important things." The night of the gala, I wore my simplest black dress, tied my hair back, and stood by the entrance with a forced smile. I watched as everyone arrived in sparkling gowns and tailored suits, hugging Carter like he was a celebrity. People would look at me, barely nod, and walk inside without a second glance. I listened to them praise my brother, talking about how proud my parents must be, how bright his future looked. A few guests asked if I was one of the servers. My parents passed me without stopping, linking arms with their wealthy friends, laughing at some inside joke. My stomach twisted, but I stayed. Even as my face felt hot and my throat tightened, I stayed because I thought maybe, if I just kept showing up, one day they would finally see me. That night, I didn't know that everything I had built in secret, every late night and quiet sacrifice, was about to crash into the spotlight whether my family liked it or not. As the gala carried on inside, I stood by the door gripping my clipboard so tightly that my fingers cramped. Each time the heavy glass doors swung open, I caught glimpses of shimmering chandeliers, people laughing over champagne, and Carter moving gracefully through the crowd like he owned the entire night. I tried to keep my focus on checking names, but each guest's casual indifference chipped away at me. A few even tossed their coats at me without a word, assuming I was hired staff. When my parents passed me with their friends, they didn't even acknowledge me. My mother's eyes slid past me like I was an inconvenient shadow, and my father simply gave a tight smile before disappearing inside. A few minutes later, I overheard a woman complimenting my mother on her perfect family. My mother responded without hesitation, "Thank you. We're so proud of Carter. Isla, well, she's still working on herself. She's helping at the door tonight, bless her heart." The group chuckled, and I felt a sharp, hot sting rise in my throat. I wanted to scream that I had built something real, something that mattered more than all their glittering displays of status, but the words stayed stuck, heavy and choking. I checked my phone during a brief lull, needing something to anchor me. A flood of photos from my nonprofit group filled my screen, a young mother smiling as she held up her first online shop certificate, a teenage girl presenting her coding project at a local showcase, a small group of mothers clapping for each other as they practiced job interview questions. I remembered every story, every late night spent helping them with websites or grant letters, every tearful hug when they felt seen and capable for the first time. For a second, I felt my spine straighten, a small surge of pride burning through the shame, but then a man stumbled up to the door and snapped, "Where's valet?" I swallowed my feelings and pointed him toward the side lot, returning to my small station, shrinking again into the version of myself my family had decided I was, then. Carter appeared near the entryway, a glass of champagne in hand, beaming like he was already on the front page of a magazine. He caught my eye and sauntered over, his smirk twisting into something cruel. "Hey, door girl," he said, voice dripping with condescension. "Thanks for holding it down out here. You know, you really do have a talent for invisible work." He laughed and glanced over his shoulder, making sure no important guests were watching, then leaned closer. "Seriously, Isla, you should stick to small gigs like this. You just don't have it in you to think big." My face went hot, and I felt the tears pressing behind my eyes, but I forced a tight smile and stayed silent. He tapped my clipboard, winked, and strolled back into the glow of the ballroom without a second thought. After he left, I stood frozen, staring at my reflection in the glass door. My hair had frizzed around my face, my eyes looked sunken, my dress felt like a costume. I hated the version of myself staring back. All my life, I had let them paint me as the fragile one, the dreamer who never quite measured up, the helper who would never be the main character. And I believed it. I let their words stick to me, let them shape the narrative of my life until I felt like nothing more than an echo in my own story. I pressed my palms against the door, trying to breathe, my thoughts spiraling. Maybe I should leave, slip away while no one was paying attention, disappear and let them keep their picture-perfect world without me staining the edges. I imagined slipping out, catching a cab home, and curling into bed alone with my guilt and disappointment, but then my phone buzzed again. A new email popped up with the subject line, "Tonight's funders and featured partners." As I opened it, I scanned the list and saw my nonprofit's name right there, highlighted in bold, listed under Community Impact Partners. My breath caught. I didn't know Carter had included it, or if someone on his team had added it without telling him. Suddenly, I remembered the women I helped, the kids who told me they wanted to be like me when they grew up, the late nights I spent fighting to keep the doors open when no one else believed in me. They believed in me. I felt something heavy begin to crack inside me, something that had kept me small for so long. In that moment, standing at the door, my heart pounding, the noise from inside echoing in my chest, I realized I didn't want to disappear. I didn't want to shrink anymore. Even if they never saw me, even if they never clapped for me at dinner, I was done hiding in the hallway. My whole life had led to this choice, stay small and safe, or step into the light, no matter how shaky my legs felt. I took a shaky breath, squared my shoulders, and decided to stay exactly where I was, but this time, not as a background helper. I decided to be seen. I stood there gripping my clipboard, my breath coming in short, shaky bursts as the weight of all those years of silence pressed against my ribs. For so long, I had swallowed their words, forced myself to stay small, convinced myself that I didn't deserve a seat at their table. But now, looking at that email on my phone, my nonprofit's name highlighted like a small, defiant spark, something inside me finally snapped. I closed my eyes for a moment, hearing the echo of every insult Carter ever threw at me, every dinner where my parents dismissed me, every time I had to smile through the sting of being invisible. And then, I opened my eyes and made a choice. I wasn't going to hide anymore. Even if my voice shook, even if my hands trembled, I was going to take up space. A few minutes later, I noticed one of Carter's event staff weaving through the crowd toward the door, his face tense and focused. He stopped in front of me, glancing at the clipboard and then meeting my eyes. "Isla," he asked, as though he wasn't sure if he was allowed to look directly at me. I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Mr. Holloway, the major donor tonight, he's asking for you. He wants to meet the founder of that community program. He said he's been following it for months and needs to speak to you right now." My heart thudded so hard I thought it might break through my chest. For a moment, I just stood there frozen. All the voices in my head screaming at me to run, to apologize, to shrink back into the doorway and let Carter handle it. But I heard another voice, quiet but unyielding, deep inside me. You are ready. I felt my hands start to sweat as I set the clipboard down on the small table beside me. The staff member kept glancing back toward the ballroom as if afraid I would disappear. Slowly, I straightened my dress, smoothed the stray hairs from my face, and forced myself to take a deep breath. I remembered the mothers from my program. Their shy smiles on the first day of class, the light in their eyes when they realized they could code a website, the tears when they got their first client. I thought about the girl who stayed after class every week to tell me her dreams of starting a company. I wasn't just carrying myself into that ballroom tonight. I was carrying all of them too. I stepped forward, my feet heavy but certain. Each step felt like I was moving through a lifetime of shame and hesitation, pushing through the thick, invisible fog that had always kept me hidden. As I got closer to the ballroom, the music seemed to swell, and I could hear the low hum of hundreds of conversations, glasses clinking, polite laughter rising and falling like waves. I paused at the edge of the room, my hand hovering just above the door frame, feeling the sweat gather on my palms. Then I took another breath and stepped inside. The lights felt blinding at first, the glittering chandeliers and camera flashes merging into a dizzying storm. Carter was standing near the stage, holding court with a circle of donors, his face locked in that practiced, perfect smile. My parents stood nearby, chatting with a couple of older guests, my mother's hand wrapped tightly around a champagne flute. Their laughter stopped as soon as they saw me. My mother's eyes widened in horror, my father's jaw tightened. Carter's smile faltered just for a second before he quickly replaced it with a puzzled look, as if he didn't recognize me at all. Then, as though the room had been holding its breath, Mr. Holloway turned. His gaze landed on me, sharp and searching, and he took a few quick steps forward. "There you are," he said, his voice booming and warm all at once. "Isla, I've been looking for you all night. I've followed your nonprofit's journey from the beginning. You're the founder, aren't you?" The room seemed to freeze. All eyes turned, hundreds of faces shifting toward me, curiosity flickering like sparks. Cameras rose, flashes popped, the low hum turned into a deafening buzz of whispers. I felt every piece of me trembling, but I forced myself to nod. "Yes," I managed, my voice stronger than I expected. "I'm the founder." Mr. Holloway's face broke into a broad, genuine smile. "Incredible," he said, turning to the crowd. "This young woman is the real reason I'm here tonight. Her work is changing lives. I wanted to meet her and personally thank her for what she's building." I looked over at Carter, his face pale and stiff, my mother's mouth slightly open, my father staring at the floor. In that moment, I felt an almost electric rush through my entire body, a wave of relief, pride, and defiance crashing together. For the first time, I wasn't the girl at the door, the invisible helper, the so-called family embarrassment. I was seen, completely and undeniably. And I had chosen to step into that light on my own. The room erupted in flashes and gasps so loud it felt like a wave crashing over me. In that moment, I stood there feeling as if every heartbeat had been leading up to this exact second. Mr. Holloway moved closer, his warm hand grasping mine as he turned to face the crowd. "Everyone needs to know who this woman is," he announced, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "Isla here is the founder of the community initiative that's given hundreds of mothers and kids a chance to build real futures. She's not just a volunteer. She's a leader. A visionary." The words rang in my ears like music I never thought I would hear. People turned toward me, eyes wide with curiosity and awe. My breath caught as I noticed journalists near the front, frantically scribbling notes and raising their cameras higher to get a clear shot. I felt the lights hit me, warm and relentless, and for once I didn't shrink away. I looked around the room and saw my mother standing frozen, her fingers clutching her champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. Her eyes darted from me to the guests, then back again, trying to process the sudden shift in her carefully maintained story. My father stood slightly behind her, his face slack, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Carter, still near the stage, opened and closed his mouth as if he was trying to form words but found none. His confident, practiced posture collapsed in an instant. He stepped forward a little, attempting to grab the spotlight back. "Mr. Holloway," he stammered, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, we support her work too. She's part of the family effort. Mr. Holloway turned sharply, his expression calm but cutting. With all due respect, Carter, this isn't about you tonight, he said, his voice slicing through the noise like a blade. Isla built this from the ground up. She didn't inherit it. She didn't coast on family connections. She created it with her own hands and her own heart. I watched Carter's face drain of color, his shoulders sagging under the weight of that truth. The guests began to shift toward me, questions flying, hands extended, people wanting to shake mine, to learn more, to tell me they admired me. A woman in a sparkling silver gown approached, her voice trembling with excitement. I've heard of your workshops, she said, pressing my hand between hers. My niece is a single mother. Could she join? How do we sign up? Another guest leaned in, his eyes bright. I'm an investor. I want to support what you're doing. Let's talk. As they spoke, something inside me unlocked, a warmth flooding my chest and radiating through every nerve. I felt taller somehow, stronger, no longer weighed down by years of ridicule and quiet insults. My mind flashed to the late nights, the empty takeout boxes on my floor, the tear-streaked grant applications, the letters of rejection I had stacked in a shoebox under my bed. Every sacrifice, every tiny win that felt insignificant at the time, now glowed with meaning. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I looked around the room and realized I didn't need their acceptance anymore. I had already proven everything to myself long before these cameras turned on me. The cameras kept clicking, catching every angle of this transformation, this unveiling. My mother stepped forward then, her voice tight, eyes pleading. Isla, dear, why didn't you tell us? We would have helped. We would have been so proud. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering, and shook my head. No. I said, my voice clear and firm. You would have tried to control it, to twist it into another one of your showpieces. This was mine. It always was. She recoiled slightly, her mouth opening like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw her not as the towering figure who dictated my worth, but as a woman terrified of losing control over the perfect image she had built. I turned back to the guests, my heart beating fast but steady, as I answered their questions, told them about our mission, and watched them light up with genuine interest. Mr. Holloway stayed by my side, occasionally jumping in to emphasize the impact and scale of our work. I felt the walls of the old narrative crumble around me, brick by brick, as I stood firmly in this new, raw, and truthful space. By the time the initial frenzy calmed, Carter had disappeared into the crowd, my parents stood to the side looking small and powerless, and I found myself in a tight circle of people who actually saw me for who I was. I had become more than a shadow at the door. I had become the story. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who believed in me and a truth that no one could deny, I knew I had finally stepped fully into the light that was always meant to be mine. The night after the gala felt like waking up in a different life. When I finally stepped out into the cool air, my head was spinning with voices, questions, promises of support, and flashes of cameras that had followed me everywhere. I walked alone to the parking lot, the echo of my heels sharp in the empty darkness, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a ghost trailing behind my family. I felt like every breath carried a new power, a quiet strength that had always been inside me but finally had room to breathe. I got home and dropped my bag on the floor, sitting on the edge of my bed with my heart still pounding. My phone was flooded with messages. Mothers from my program sent voice notes in tears, saying they had seen me on live stream clips and were so proud. Old friends from college, people I hadn't heard from in years, texted to say they had no idea what I had built and how incredible it was to watch me finally take the spotlight. Even strangers messaged, sharing stories about how they felt stuck in the shadows too, telling me they felt hope because of what I did. As I read each message, my eyes blurred with tears, but they weren't the kind of tears I had shed so many nights alone in my apartment, doubting myself, wondering if I was wasting my life. These were tears that washed something away, years of invisible bruises from words that chipped at me, the quiet shame of feeling like I had failed simply because I didn't fit into my family's perfect frame. The next morning, I woke up early and walked to the small office space where my nonprofit lived. The sign on the door looked different in the morning light, almost as if it glowed. I stepped inside, running my fingers along the tables and the walls where countless dreams had been born. There were sticky notes everywhere, old vision boards. Scribbles from brainstorming sessions with mothers who barely believed they could dream at all. I sat down at my desk and felt a warmth spread across my chest, a feeling of coming home to myself. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Carter. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. His voice was hesitant, a strange tremor under his usual confident tone. Isla, we were wondering if we could meet, talk things over, he said. I pictured him standing in some expensive office, still trying to script everything to save his own image. My parents had texted too, long paragraphs that sounded like public statements rather than apologies. We're so proud, we always believed in you, please come over for dinner so we can talk. But I didn't know them my triumph. I didn't need their applause to validate the quiet power I had finally claimed. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I turned off my phone and looked around the room, listening to the echoes of laughter and learning that had filled these walls. That afternoon, a few of the mothers dropped by unexpectedly. One of them, Lila, rushed to hug me so hard I almost lost my balance. She whispered, "You made us believe